Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, it's a busy sports show today, and obviously part three, we're going to focus on football and international football. Dare I say, we've heard about the goings on in terms of the Premier League from the former Premier League manager Phil Brown of Hull City. We're now going to cast our eyes a bit further afield, and obviously it's great to be going to this country today, given the fact that one of our most renowned international defenders is going to be playing his football for the remainder of the year in this country, obviously, as well. So Irish eyes are going to be cast very much on the La Liga, and dare I say, an expert that knows everything that comes about La Liga in terms of Barcelona, in terms of Real Madrid, and for the little known clubs like Cadiz, Getafe, Mallorca. He knows all the goings on in terms of those clubs as well. The one and only Terry Gibson. Terry, pleasure joining us this evening on a real busy day in the Premier League, but not so much in Spain, I hear.
Yes, no, I'm afraid so, Jim. It's we do have a frenzy regarding the Premier League, which isn't matched anywhere else in Europe. And Spain, it's pretty much a normal day, to be honest. They know the transfer window closes. One or two clubs are trying to do some business. But as we speak, 14 clubs in La Liga haven't spent anything in this transfer window. And that includes, of course, the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona. Atletico Madrid have been the big spenders at the top of the La Liga tree. That's €3 million on Memphis Depay. That's it. So I think the biggest spenders have actually been Espanyol with €8 million spent on a Mexican central defender called Cesar Montes, who played in the World Cup. But they had 8 million over from the last transfer window because they weirdly sold a player called Raul de Thomas to Rayo Vallecano a day after the window closed for 8 million. So he couldn't play until January. He was in contention for a World Cup spot, but somehow manufactured and moved to Rayo Vallecano. It cost him his World Cup spot, but it left Espanyol with €8 million to spend, and they've done that. So they're the biggest spenders. The rest is loans. And not a lot of money spent at all. But that's how it's no different this season to any other season. In Spain, there isn't a frenzy towards the January transfer window. Most of the clubs do their business in the summer. And this is just to, tie loose ends up if they need to. But as I say, 14 clubs haven't spent €1.
Terry, I'm sort of intrigued, obviously, and everyone in world football is intrigued by the situation in Barcelona, a club so massive in depth. I know my own favourite club, Inter Milan, are facing a similar sort of crisis, and their depths are nearly over 700 million, but Barcelona could probably equal that or even sort of better it, dare I say. But it almost seems like the policy of Barcelona is they bought players in the past 2 or 3 windows. The field Xavi's maybe decided, no, not right for him. Can I barter, dare I say? Can I swap? An awful lot of potential swaps Barcelona are throwing around the place. And the latest one I hear that they were trying to throw around the place during January was Kessie, the former AC Milan midfielder. An awful lot of interest in Kessie before he went to Barcelona, and trying to offer Kessie up in terms of a make-weight swaps. Was there any possibility that any clubs thought that was a viable deal, and in terms of who were Barcelona sort of shipping Kessie around to?
Yeah, I think that is always the case. I think Barcelona had an interesting policy where they signed players that were out of contract. So they free transfers like Christensen, Bellerin. Memphis Depay was a previous signing out of contract. And of course, Frank Kessie comes into that as well, that category. And you almost look at it now from the outside and you wonder whether they signed players that were free in hope they could sell them for a few bob, because that's worked with Memphis Depay. That's why he's only gone to Atletico Madrid for €3 million. He's worth more than that, but his contract was up in the summer. Barcelona got him on a free. So I think that's what Barcelona are looking at. They needed reinforcing. And it's interesting how people perceive the debt at Barcelona. Their biggest problem is meeting the financial requirements of financial fair play, which are based on La Liga rules. So this isn't the UEFA financial fair play. This is based on the Spanish rules, La Liga rules. And this goes back to 15 years ago where at the end of, I think it was 2005, around about that period, 180 players and some managers and coaches were left owing money by La Liga clubs. So this has been a case of La Liga trying to put its house in order, and it's done so in many ways. And one of the better ways they've done it is to redistribute the TV revenue on a fairer basis. Back then, it was 70% for Real Madrid and Barcelona, 10% for Atletico, and the rest could fight over the other 20%. So clubs were earning something like €5 million a year for TV revenue. So therefore, what has happened over the years, that's been better, but it's very, very strict. So Barcelona can handle their debt. You know, like many Premier League clubs, they can handle their debt. But unfortunately for Barcelona, La Liga doesn't allow it. So that's why there's all these problems. So it's sort of been a misconception about how Barcelona haven't got any money. They've got money, but La Liga don't allow them to distribute it. So signing players on free transfers, trying to sell them, that makes the income better for the club. It's better for the books. It balances the books, which might mean then that they might be allowed to go and sign one or two players. But the problem is when you sign for Barcelona as a player like Frankie de Jong, Frank Kessie, once you sign there, they don't want to leave. You know, they're earning big money. They're living in a wonderful city. They're playing in a great league, and they're playing for one of the biggest clubs in Europe. So it's hard to kind of push them out the door. So that's the problem Barcelona have now.
And Terry, we've seen them being very, dare I say, cheeky. I suppose Fiorentina would probably say very ignorant and for a sort of miserly sort of offer in terms of a 3 million loan offer for Amrabat. Obviously, trying to get into the player sort of head. Obviously, Fiorentina were probably, judging by the Serie A, they aren't going to make Champions League football. They're roughly a middle table in terms of team. In terms of Serie A, in terms of the summer. Obviously, Amrabat will probably leave in the summer as well. Is this an idea of maybe Barcelona trying to turn Amrabat, get him in the loan, and then if it's a success, then pursue something in the summer, get a head start maybe ahead of maybe the likes of Liverpool, who would probably renew their interest in Amrabat in the summer once one would suspect if he doesn't go in January?
Yeah, exactly that. I think once you get a player to Barcelona, we've seen recently they're on the upturn. I mean, they've had a disaster in European competition this year, but they're top of La Liga by 5 points over Real Madrid. And once you get to Barcelona as a player, it's as I say, with Frank Kessie and we saw Frankie de Jong, it's difficult to push them out the door and make them leave. So in terms of pulling power, Barcelona still have that. You know, they've got their financial problems. They're not the team and not the club they were 5-10 years ago, but they're on their way back. And, you know, a lot of players in Europe, given a choice, will still look to Barcelona as one of the first choices. So Amrabat, his brother played in Spain as well for Leganés and Malaga, had a good spell in Spanish football. It's interesting how we look at loans now. I mean, João Felix going on loan to Chelsea from Atletico Madrid for €11 million. That's just for the loan deal. So although they've signed Memphis Depay and Matt Doherty, we'll come to later, I'm sure, they're €8 million in profit in terms of what they got for a player who's only gone on loan and is going to be back in a few months' time. So the loan market is rapidly changing. And as you say, James, that if there is Fiorentina are mid-table, if they can get €3 million just for a loan deal, it might be something that interests them as opposed to selling the player completely. So Amrabat to Barcelona, I'm surprised other clubs haven't come in for him because he had such a fantastic World Cup.
And Terry, obviously Real Madrid are sitting pretty, dare I say, and obviously Carlo Ancelotti is very happy with his sort of options. And I suppose people probably looked at Real Madrid and probably said maybe instead can understand obviously no incomings coming in, obviously trying to upset a happy locker room, but people will probably look at it and dare I say in terms of maybe Eden Hazard. There was talks of Fenerbahce earlier on in the window. Obviously Eden Hazard had his best time in the Premier League, hasn't really worked for him, dare I say, just my own personal opinion, since he's gone to Spain. He has never really discovered that form he had in terms of Chelsea. Do you think maybe Real Madrid possibly looked at the option of Hazard and said, no, we'll stick with him until the summer?
No, I think they'll be desperate to move Eden Hazard on. I think it's the player's decision to stay. And again, it comes down to the fact that, you know, players, once they get to Real Madrid and Barcelona, they don't really want to leave. I think in fairness to Eden Hazard, he's publicly declared that he wants to leave in a summer as opposed to a January transfer window. So it's a shame. It's not just your opinion, Jim. It's everybody's opinion. It hasn't worked out for him at Real Madrid. And I've been desperate for him to do it because having watched him in the Premier League for so long, I thought he was a genuine Galactico when they signed him. But from day one, it hasn't worked to the extent now you almost forget he's at Real Madrid. He's on the bench every game. He never gets on. He's never someone that's discussed in the media in terms of deserving a place in the starting 11. When he turned up at Real Madrid, there was no Vinicius Junior, there was no Rodrigo. They've overtaken him, Asensio. They've all gone above him in terms of Ancelotti picking the starting 11. So I presume that's going to be the case in the summer, that Eden Hazard, if he wants to play football, if he wants to actually, get his career going again, then he has to leave. But high salary is going to be difficult for other clubs to take. They're going to have to take a hit on what they paid for him, but his contract is running down, although it's still got a couple of years to go. So it's going to be difficult, always difficult. There's no exit strategy. When you sign a Galactico, you're not thinking, well, in case we have to sell him, what can we get for him? Is anyone going to match his wages? And that's where a lot of clubs fall down. And not every transfer works, of course. And even ones where you think you're paying 80, 90 million should work. In Hazard's case, it totally hasn't worked.
And Terry, 2 years ago, memory serves me correctly, Man United, Arsenal were all, even when Ancelotti was at Everton, all the talk was Isco coming to the Premier League. It's going to cost 40 million. It's going to cost 50 million. Obviously, a hot property in the world. Dare I say now, he's available on a free transfer, and there doesn't seem to be any English clubs, dare I say, pursuing him and making offers, even clubs lower down the league. Do you think Everton now finding ideal is crying out for someone that creativity? But in terms of Isco, the sort of, dare I say, the whole appeal has seemed to be wavered. The Union Berlin thing has fallen through, but you'd have thought there would be an awful lot more sort of clubs out there in terms of Europe that would be putting a hand up or chomping at the bit to get a player who's won nearly everything in the game.
Yeah, it was a mystery, Jim, I have to say, in terms of why Seville and him gave up on each other so quick. He was a new player in the summer. It was a big signing for Sevilla. And he didn't do bad. When I saw him play, and I'd watch every game in La Liga every week, he was okay. He was on the way to progressing. Sevilla were having a difficult time, but he had games where you thought, I can see, everyone knows why Sevilla bought him. It was a glamorous signing. So I was kind of really surprised when they both decided to part ways as quickly as they did. I'm a big fan of Isco, but it takes a certain team in a certain position in the league to sign Isco or an Isco, because he's creative, he's skillful, he does work hard, but he's all about playing in the attacking half of the pitch. So if you're a relegation threatened team, Isco isn't for you. If you're a team, I've always thought Isco would have been a good fit for Manchester City. He's that level, and with the right coach and with the right players around him in a team that dominate possession, he is a super player. So I'm a big fan, but I think it has to be the right type of team for Isco. If you're struggling against relegation, if you're in a relegation battle, then probably Isco is one to avoid, to be honest.
And Terry, tell me about the two Brazilians that have left Atletico Madrid recently to go to the Premier League. Quincha has gone to Wolves, and it looks like the Brazilian centre-half Felipe is going to go to Nottingham Forest. Quincha going to an awful lot of money to Wolves, but Felipe going very much on the cheap to Nottingham Forest. Is that a very much a bargain buy for Forest, and is it maybe a gamble, dare I say, for Wolves?
I think Matheus Cunha is a really good signing. And I think that was a case of, it was a player that Simeone wouldn't have wanted to lose. Because they went out of the Champions League and didn't even qualify for the Europa League, I think they've taken a financial hit. And when I look at Cunha as being a traditional type of centre forward, back to goal, big, strong, he's quick. There's a lack of those about. And he's relatively young, he's in early 20s. And whenever he played for Atletico Madrid, created a good impression. So it was a surprise when he was allowed to leave, but I think we all understood why he was allowed to leave, because Atletico needed to raise some money to cover the loss that they were going to suffer by not being in the other stages of the Champions League and not even qualifying for the Europa League. So he's a good signing. He's a good player. Felipe is 2 million, I think, euros is what something, £2 million is what Wolves, Nottingham Forest are paying. He's experienced, cynical, decent in the air. He thinks he's better than he is on the ball, but he gets away with it a lot of the time. But he's a real cynical, hard-nosed, tough defender. Now, that will suit the Premier League. And for a team that's battling in relegation, I think it's a good bit of business. I think if you would have told me that paying 10 to 15 million for him, I would have said, no, forget it. But I think at that price, what we see, what do you get in the Premier League now for £2 or £3 million? Not an awful lot. So I think that could be a good bit of business by Nottingham Forest.
And do you think clubs are looking at Saul Niguez's situation at Atletico Madrid and looking at the loan that happened in Chelsea was an almighty disaster, dare I say, for Saul Niguez in terms of the player, in terms for Atletico Madrid, for Chelsea, for everyone really, it didn't sort of work. And Saul's reputation took a massive sort of hit, and he seems to be available, but people seem to be maybe put off given that experience that he had at Chelsea in terms of saying, is he a one club type player?
Yep, he signed a 9-year contract a few years ago for Atletico Madrid, and at that time he was hot property, and everybody knew why. He was top class. He'd come through the youth system, he played in the first team, and he was a star. And he was scoring goals in big games in the Champions League. So he was a victim. If I can explain his downfall, he was a victim of being such a utility player that suddenly he was playing from midfield. He was playing left back. He was playing left wing back. He was playing out wide on the left in the midfield four instead of playing in a central midfield position. And eventually it came to, he lost form, lost his place, went to Chelsea. That didn't work out. He's come back to Atletico and he's finding it hard to get playing time. But there's still a player in there, and he's still at a relatively young age. There's plenty of playing time left in him. He's lost confidence, lost belief, and Simeone has lost confidence in him. Ironically, we're talking about a player that came on at the weekend and scored the winning goal in a really important win at Osasuna, and it was a real reminder of what Saul Niguez is all about. The problem is, Jimmy, he signed a 9-year contract. He's on very, very big money. So therefore, if Atletico do decide to loan him out, they're going to have to pay a lot of his wages. Chelsea, I guess, paid a significant amount of his salary. But because that move didn't work out, it's going to be difficult to see another club taking the option and maybe getting him for 25% of his wages that they're going to have to pay, and Atletico pay the rest. It's going to be a difficult move for Sal. I hope he gets his career back on track, confident and has belief. Then he is a genuine top-class footballer still.
And Terry, it will intrigue me, obviously. There always been pipeline rumours about the Bilbao players, the Nico Williams and Anachi Williams and Iker Muniain. But what seems to be every time there's mentions about them, they never go anywhere. Is that because Bilbao are so stringent in their contract details that they have these ridiculous clauses in terms of meeting valuations of maybe up on 100 million release clauses that no club is ever going to sort of meet, in terms of that they're able to hold on to these players transfer window after transfer window after transfer window, in terms of that any, dare I say, any time a player is mentioned in terms of Bilbao, but they manage to hold them, dare I say, they never lose them.
Yep, it's twofold. I mean, playing for Athletic Club, because of the Basque-only rule, for the Basque players that play for Athletic Club, it's like playing for the national team. It's a real, genuine honour. So they feel like they're playing for their national team every single week in La Liga. And they're so cash rich, it's unbelievable. So they don't need to sell. Players don't want to leave. They don't need to sell. They have really high buyout clauses. The players never kick up a fuss and want to leave the club. But they're cash rich because they can't spend any money in the transfer window. They must be the easiest scouting job in world football to be the chief scout of Athletic Bilbao, because you literally are buying from round the corner. They know every single player that's eligible according to their requirements that can play for the club. So they're not scouting in Brazil. They're not scouting in Peru. They're not scouting all over Europe. They know exactly the players they can sign. They're all playing in La Liga. And so they literally can't spend the money. They get fantastic crowds, wonderful stadium. And for those footballers, it's a real honour for them to play for Athletic Club. So it's really difficult to get them away. The club don't have to work hard to keep them. They pay really good money. They pay good salaries. So the players are well looked after. And every single player sees it as an honour to be representing the best country in La Liga. So, they've got some fantastic players. Clubs would love to buy them. But in general, clubs don't even bother because they know that the athletic club hold all the aces. So it's a difficult one to buy a player from. I say difficult, almost impossible. Unless you pay the buyout clause, it's almost impossible. It's a unique football club, a unique story, and they continue to do well towards the top end of La Liga.
And Terry, before we finish on Matt Doherty, I just want to bring attention to one player. Obviously, a fantastic representation in the Spanish under teams, well coveted at under 19, under 20 level for Spain in terms of his role. Brian Gill obviously went to the Premier League. Dare I say it's been a disaster. His physicality, he never really had the physicality for a Premier League type of football. It almost feels like he was sort of bullied off it from day one. He's coming back to Sevilla, coming back to Spanish football, where he'd probably have that bit of more creative freedom. He won't have that intense in-your-face style attitude that you get in the Premier League, where it's 100 miles an hour sort of attitude. Is that going to suit that slower pace, going to suit Gil going back to La Liga in terms of obviously the high-paced games against Barcelona and Real Madrid, but the games against the Mallorcas, the Osasunas, the Getafes, is that going to really suit him, dare I say, and maybe resurrect his career again?
Well, those games are not as easy for Sevilla as they used to be. They're 2 points above the relegation zone, having won their last two games. It's an incredible deal. Spurs gave them Lamela, 25 million euros to take Brian Hill. Now Sevilla have got the 25 million euros. They've got Lamela still, and now they've got Brian Hill back. And he's a really interesting player. He had a fantastic season on loan. Sevilla is the club that he was brought up at. And I was surprised when they allowed him to leave. He had a season on loan at Eibar, amongst other clubs, where he played for a team that was relegated, but one of the hardest working physical teams in La Liga. And he was one of the standout players that season in a team that got relegated in the whole of La Liga. He was one of the players that we talked about on a weekly basis. So he can handle the physicality. And I think that being a Spurs fan myself, and I'm seeing him recently and listening to the opinions of Spurs supporters, they've changed their mind. They like what they see. And, it's easy to write him off at the start. When you see him, he's small. He looks quite fragile. Trust me, he's not. He can work hard. He can put his foot in. He doesn't mind the physical challenge. But I think in the Premier League, we looked at him as someone who was small and slight and thought, he's not going to be up to the physicality of the Premier League. La Liga is physical as well. So there isn't an awful lot of difference now between La Liga and the Premier League. It's difficult for him to get chances at Spurs with Richarlison joining the club, Kulusevski, Son, Harry Kane. It was difficult for him to get going, but probably a move back to Sevilla is perfect for him because it's the club that he was brought up at. He probably didn't want to leave. He's from Sevilla, so it's an ideal move for him. But I'm slightly disappointed as a Spurs fan that he's departed. Hopefully he'll be back, but it's certainly an interesting move back for him.
And I know just one quick point on that sort of deal. I know an awful lot of Spurs fans at the time were disappointed to see Lamela go. A vast majority of Spurs fans didn't even want to see Lamela go, and they were sort of curious about the deal in terms of the money paid and Lamela on top of that as well. And do you think maybe that's the sort of he's carried that resentment from fans that they obviously saw a player that in Lamela, all right, he wasn't started every week, but when he did start for Spurs, he did produce key moments at crucial times for Spurs. And probably Spurs are looking back and saying that we got nothing for Lamela, and in terms of we lost a player of quality in terms of Lamela. And I think Gill as that's so Spurs have looked at, maybe not really disappointed in Gill, but disappointed on that they lost Lamela in terms of the deal.
I think that's a great point you make. The expectation levels of a popular player leaving and a new player coming in. And before even Spurs, I'm surrounded by Spurs supporters where I live, and where I socialised. And before he even played for Spurs, they wrote him off because Lamela was popular. And then they see this little player turn up that, I'm not going to lie, he looks like a Beatle. I've seen it looks like every single one of the Beatles I've seen on social media at the same time. And he doesn't look your traditional, footballer. But trust me, he can play. Now, I think personally, he'll end up staying at Sevilla. I think because he was born and bred there. I think he'll end up staying there, and probably Spurs will look to try and do a deal. But I think there's enough Spurs supporters in recent weeks and months have changed their opinion about him and see that he's an exciting talent that's positive, that's dynamic, that wants to take people on. He wants to take defenders on whenever he gets the ball. It's a fantastic little dribbler. If he gets knocked over, he'll get back up and go into the next challenge. I don't think Spurs have seen the best of him, but when you look at the quality that there is at Spurs, it's difficult for him to get appearances on a regular basis. And any player's going to struggle. But certainly I agree with you, the expectation levels of Lamela going, 25 million being paid, and then this player turning up who looks about 14, 15 years old, it turned some Spurs supporters off straight away. And I did spend quite a lot of time saying, no, trust me, he can play. I know he's small, I know he looks fragile, but he isn't. And I think slowly but surely, well, I know a lot of them are being quite positive about him, but I do fear that this move might be permanent, either back to Sevilla or back to another club in La Liga, because he is highly regarded.
And Terry, we're going to finish up with Irish Eyes, and Irish Eyes are smiling. And it's a new adventure. And obviously, in terms of never before has an Irish player played with one of the top three clubs in La Liga. And Atletico Madrid, in terms of popularity, in terms of size, in terms of its sheer fan base, would be deemed the third most popular team in Spain, behind obviously the big two in Barcelona and Real Madrid. And Matt Doherty is going venturing out there, and dare I say, is it obviously the Trippier thing worked wonders? Diego Simeone is probably taking a chance here in terms of trying to find a similar sort of trick. Is it a shot in the dark by Atletico Madrid, and maybe a sort of, dare I say, a no-lose situation for Matt Doherty? Because it seems to be that the Brazilian right back, I can't remember his name, it seems to have got the nod in terms of Tottenham, in terms of Conte's favouring. So, dare I say, a short-term loan for Doherty, experienced the Spanish lifestyle, nothing to lose. And dare I say, that's why Atletico Madrid didn't want to spend any money either on the deal, because they're a bit sort of iffy on the situation. And if it goes all well for both parties, is there a high possibility it could become permanent in the summer?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, congratulations to Matt Doherty, because he's joining one of the biggest clubs in Europe, playing under one of the biggest names in Europe. It's going to be hard for him to get in to play on a regular basis. But for me, someone who watches every game every week in La Liga, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, Matt Doherty's best position is right back, right wing back. But I see a position more likely to be in the right side of the three central defenders, the way that Atletico play. So I think he gives some good versatility in the fact he can play right back in a 4, he can play right wing back in a 5, or he could possibly play as one of those three centre backs, because Felipe looks like he's going to Forest. So that seems to be the obvious replacement. In Matt Doherty coming in, that he can cover both those positions. It's going to be a fantastic experience for him. It really is. It's a shame that Atletico are out of the Copa del Rey. They lost to Real Madrid last week. They're out of Europe, but they have a tremendous task on their hand to qualify for the top 4 for the Champions League. He'll be playing with some great players and under one of the best defensive coaches in the world. And we've seen from other players, Kieran Trippier went to Atletico, came back a better player. And he will, I know, he will give a lot of that credit to Simeone and his coaching staff in the way that he was coached at Atletico Madrid. So this will go the same for Matt Doherty. I'm really, as someone who works on Spanish football every week on TV, I'm really looking forward to seeing him playing. It's quite weird that Tottenham have now got 2 fullbacks on loan at Atletico Madrid. Sergio Reguilon is there. He's the left-sided defender. Now Matt Doherty. It's going to be a fantastic experience for him. Sensational crowd, sensational stadium. It's one of the major clubs in Europe. And as a Spurs fan, I'm disappointed to see a player leave. But for Matt Doherty, it's going to be a fantastic experience. I'm trying to think back to the last Irish player to play in La Liga, probably Steve Finnan, Ian Hart, that
Yeah.
period, 2009, 2008, 7, something like that for Levante and Espanyol. So this is big news. It's going to create a lot of interest. It's going to be tough for him to play. Nahuel Molina, who played so well for Argentina in the World Cup, has got that position covered at the moment, the right wing-back position. Marcos Llorente plays there as well. But I see an opening as a right-sided central defender in a three-man defence. Maybe, Savic keeps getting suspended and keeps getting injured. So I can see Matt Doherty getting playing time. I hope so. It's going to be fun to watch. And his form has been pretty good at Spurs. So, again, it's a slight surprise he's been allowed to leave. But I think Spurs are signing Pedro Porro for big money. So that means there's a position there that Atletico Madrid have made the most of. And it's going to be really interesting. Something really for us to be interested in from now to the end of the season, watching Matt Doherty playing for Atletico Madrid.
Terry, unfortunately, time has caught up with us there this evening. Thanks for sharing your insights on the Spanish market on transfer deadline. All the talk, whether it be Barcelona, Real Madrid, Eden Hazard, to finishing up with Matt Doherty. Terry, hopefully we'll get you on sometime in the near future again. But for the moment, Terry Gibson, stay safe, take care, and God bless.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim.